get out of here. Sorry.
Yeah.
We are live. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Apologies for the disasters. Excuse me.
It's the nature of our show. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to Robust American Love. My name is Karen Karbiener. I'm president of the Walt Whitman Initiative. We're a very small arts nonprofit, a 501c3, and we have the mission of celebrating New York's literary legacy and keeping poetry alive and well in New York and beyond. We are also the center for a lot of poetry related events, such as the one you're just about to enjoy. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're not the best at that, but we do have accounts. And we have a really good YouTube channel where we have dozens and dozens of these wonderful talks that we've been doing since COVID, just bringing you talent and friends and good feelings, and especially right before Thanksgiving. Just very grateful for amazing people like Kevin, who you're just about to meet. So please do check us out. And you can also visit our website. You can help sustain our programs, events, and initiatives. There's actually a link there for donations. So, and we appreciate everything. We're completely volunteer. So we started this series, and notice it's a speaker series, not a lecture series, because we wanted to present timely and public-facing conversations on Whitman's life, work, and legacy. It's kind of spiraled out from there, although today we're going back to Walt. And in fact, we have him in the house, I'm really pleased to say. So they're not academic talks. They're very conversational. Kevin and I are going to have a good time. We know each other. We love each other. So you'll feel that too. But if you have a question, please do ask. If you're live, you can do that by posting in the chat if you're on our YouTube account. And again, if you miss us, our YouTube Walt Whitman Initiative channel, really, really wonderful films to watch right there. So today, as I've been hinting, we have a very special guest, John Kevin Jones. And John Kevin Jones goes by Kevin Jones. And he is an actor and an interpreter, an artist extraordinaire. He is giving us a presentation of some of his talents, and also just talking about his technique and his inspirations. And he titled this talk, Whitman in My Mouth and All Over My Body, a discussion about poetry in performance. Couldn't get more provocative than that, right? But that is actually the way that Kevin brings Whitman to us. He doesn't just read the poetry, he performs it. He has a really incredible roster of events that he's done, as well as successes. In a few weeks, I'm headed for a Christmas Carol at the Merchants House Museum, which apparently Kevin has been doing now for 11 years. Very, very popular show. Please do check it out. Go to the Merchants House website and snag the few tickets that are left there. So that's been going since 2013. He's also done a show called Killing an Evening with Edgar Allan Poe, which he's going to tell us more about. I don't know a lot about that one, but I do know and love Whitman in Love, which is a physical and emotional, intellectual experience with Whitman's secret same-sex love poems, Live Oak with Moths. And that's slated to return to Merchants House in 2024 in the summer. So if you missed it last year, or if you want to repeat, we get to see Kevin again in that beautiful backyard of the Merchants House Museum here in New York City. Kevin spent many seasons in regional theater across the country before settling in New York City in 2000. And apparently he spends his free time thinking of other shows to entertain and excite the imaginations of Summoners Ensemble's audiences. And he's a member of the Actors Equity Association, Screen Actors Guild, and the Dramatists Guild of America. So as I said, today we're treated to Kevin telling us more about his technique, how he embodies Whitman and others through performance, and all sorts of questions and possibilities that arise from these performances. So first off, I need to say, hello, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me. This is amazing and wonderful. I'm so excited to talk about Walt.
Well, not only talking about Walt, but actually talking like Walt.
Yeah.
And we thought it would be a really cool thing if you would just open up with a an interpretation. And I asked you to choose your favorite, and I guess we're going to Live Oak with Moss.
We are. So Whitman in Love centers around Live Oak with Moss, of course, and so I ask that the listeners imagine a few things while I am going through this, because usually this is a performance. I'm not someone who is interested in reciting poetry. I'm interested in letting it inhabit me and live through me. So when I present it, it's generally with my whole body and in my whole mouth. There's something in the title there. And so, so I do try to have all of that. So I need you to imagine that we are in a more expansive space. I need you to imagine that I perhaps have a little bit more Walt Whitman-y look around my body and face today, and especially.
But you do look like Walt. I mean, I think our viewers will agree with me there. There's definitely a resemblance.
There is a little resemblance, and when I put the hat on, I have to say, it even got me. I put the hat on when we did get it. It came in the mail, and I took it right downstairs to the backyard in my apartment in New York, and we took lots of pictures because I was enamored with that hat.
Invite me next time. I'll be there with my phone.
All right. So without any delay, this is, imagine me on my feet, in my full Whitman self, with my full Whitman hat and my full Whitman voice. When I heard at the close of the day how I had been praised in the Capitol, still it was not a happy night for me that followed. Nor when I caroused, nor when my favorite plans were accomplished, was I really happy. But that day, when I rose at dawn from a bed of perfect health, electric, inhaling sweet breath, when I saw the full moon in the west grow pale and disappear in the morning light, when I wandered alone over the beach and, undressing, bathed, laughing with the waters, and saw the sunrise, and when I thought how my friend, my lover, was coming, then, oh, I was happy. Each breath tasted sweeter, and all that day my food nourished me more. And the beautiful day passed well, and the next came with equal joy, and with the next at evening came my friend, and that night, while all was still, I heard the waters roll slowly, continually up the shores. I heard the hissing rustle of the liquid and sands as directed to me, whispering to congratulate me, for the friend I love lay sleeping by my side. In the stillness, his face was inclined towards me, while the moon's clear beams shone, and his arm lay lightly over my breast. And that night, I was happy.
It is such a joy. It's such a learning experience to hear a poem recited by someone who knows the author, because there's a whole school that just does recitations. I often try to have my students listen to what they're reading, especially if it's poetry. And there's just, all manner of quality when it comes to this. But I think the reason your work really stands out is because you know the poet and the work.
I like
Yeah,
Yeah, I
please.
think that I like to think that my delving into his words and his feelings has brought me closer to um, his personality, his sense of being, his true sense of self. And really, in these particular poems, Live Oak with Moss, and that is what excited me most, is that I do feel like these are speaking from the most authentic place, a place that's not only authentic, but understands the consequences of being this honest in the day that he's writing it. And I find that's what I found so
Mm.
motivating about these pieces. I had been looking for so long to do something by Whitman, not just because there's an appearance, but I really have fallen in love with Whitman quite a long time ago. His sense of uh, body and self, and that nothing is off limits from any of us, that we all have it, all the good that is in front of us is at our disposal, and for our taking. We have to get up and make that happen. So I love that sense of empowerment that I feel when I read Walt Whitman's poetry. So
Mm.
I had been looking for something for a long time. And the fact that he is queer, the fact that we have seen that he is, at the very least, he is queer. At the very most, he's a gay man. And I wanted to really show that part of him today. And so I did go through Calamus quite a lot, and I was looking for that perfect piece and what would it be. And of course, COVID gave us all a lot of time to do a lot of reading. And so I was doing a lot of reading. And then I really, and I happened upon the Live Oak with Moss series on the archive. And that is where I was.
I'll pull it up actually so folks can see it, because it is an amazing resource.
It's
And you are
phenomenal.
talking about
Yes.
the Walt Whitman archive, which is for a lot of us indispensable. And up there, they've loaded the original manuscripts for the Live Oak with Moss series. And I guess the thing to know about this series is that Whitman never published these poems as they appeared, right? He sort of pulled away from that. He revised some of them and put them into the Calamus cluster in 1860. But these poems are very special. And, that's why Brian and I decided to put out an edition of them too. We were so moved. But I know you're very interested in the manuscript itself.
Absolutely. I was, when I found these, and also I found there's an article, piece of criticism on the archive as well about it that spoke about the inscription on the back,
Mhm.
which I am going to misquote now, but it is, he says, a cluster of basically a cluster of poems that he's put together for himself for later to peruse
Mhm.
upon the approach of death, which he has collected for that purpose. It
That's
seems
right.
to say to me, and that's what really brought tears to my eyes. It really made me, I really identified with that in such a way that when people see your work as an artist, they often feel that they do know you, and they do know a part of you, but
Mm.
there is a part of you as an artist that wants them to know it all, the bare humanity that
Mm.
you're trying to bring forth in the vulnerable moments that you do in your work. So you want to bring that forth, and that is what I saw when I was reading this the first time, and what I felt in myself, that I felt this was an opportunity for me too to let my audience know that I am a storyteller and I am all of these things, but this also speaks about me as well. I am a gay man. I am this person. This informs everything that I say and everything that I do. Is it all of me? No. But to take away part of it is to
Mm.
take away all of me. And so there is in a lot of ways, this became something that was very important for me to share.
Mhm.
And So I really drove very hard to get the piece put up, and it did actually
Oh, it was
against.
spectacular. Forget about put up. Like, just to frame it for the folks that were not lucky enough to see it. And remember, you can see it next year at the Merchant's House. The Merchant's House has a really elegant backyard, somehow saved. And we should talk about that later, because the Merchant's House is always seeking help and, really in a vulnerable position where it is. But there's still just a gorgeous garden, and Kevin comes out there dressed in like the 1855 frontispiece and actually holding tea-stained paper like these manuscripts, as if, not only is he Whitman, but he just wrote these or just dug them up again to recite them. So, and he walks amongst the people who are seated in not linear rows, but sort of throughout the garden. So it has a really organic feeling. And I think that complements the poems really beautifully for me because, as I've written about these, they are about seeing homosexuality and queerness as something natural. It was very common to describe, love for men as something that was unnatural. So Whitman evokes a lot of natural imagery in Live Oak with Moss, right? Like all four elements are in here, and there's tree symbolism. And I think it all goes back to kind of trying to buy back the idea of the naturalness of any type of love. And so you embody that, right? When you're going through the garden and talking to people, and people get to turn and interact, and everyone is eating and just having a good time. So it was such an unusual experience. We're so used to kind of being fed ideas, but this was really organic.
Yeah, I really did want it to be that sharing of ideas, because for me also theater has to transcend itself. It has to reach outside of the text, whatever it is, and touch everyone in the audience, regardless of their sexuality or how much they identify with the actor, the author, whatever it is. And there is something much greater, and we've already touched on this to a degree in Whitman's work for everyone, is that your authentic self is right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you may access it at any time. It's there for you. And I think that for me too, in giving these, that is the thing that I want to transcend the work, that I want to go over the pages and into the minds and psyches, because that's the kind of thing that will infect them, not only to perhaps go out and see, read more Whitman and to find more experiences that help to open up their authentic selves, but also just to really be able to make that a part of their journey. That awareness becomes part of their journey. That's what storytelling I try to do, to make whatever I'm out there part of their awareness.
It's helpful. It's profoundly helpful for people, no matter what kind of person you are, but to hear that sort of authenticity, both yours and Whitman's. And, just to go back to this poem, which you selected, and maybe I'm going to go back to this. So if people have trouble with the handwriting, they can look at the transcription on the right-hand side. Speaking of Whitman and healing and helpfulness, what draws you to this particular poem? Why, of all Whitman poems, did you want to recite this one today?
Well, I think the reason why this one speaks to me is really because I suppose that is there has been that moment for me in my life when I was looking for the thing that was going to make me happy. Is it this? Is it that? Is it outside of myself in some way? Is it here? And then to have fallen in love the first time and to realize that this is it. Oh no, there's eating, there's drinking, there's writing, there's acting, there's this, there's that, but then there's falling in love.
Mm-hmm.
And all that entails. Certainly, there is the hormonal aspect of it, which I do not discount at all. That is wonderful, and the experience in your body falling in love, of sharing your body with someone else, of having that moment where you come together with another person and begin to identify not as I, but as we, that there is this, that is a happy moment. That is something. And I think that the happiness is raised for many people who perhaps see it as being out of reach for themselves. And you don't have to be gay for it to seem out of reach. I've known plenty of people who felt that love was out of reach for them somehow, for some reason or another. But as a gay person, and for me in particular, I didn't think. I grew up in the 70s, and I grew up hearing all the lies about gay people. And, I'm going to tell you, I believe them. I heard them and I took them in, and I believed that that must be true. If they all say that, then that must be true. Love will never find me. I will be alone. This will be my life. And all that goes along with that. And I discovered at some point through meeting other gay people that that wasn't true. And I think that that was why when I fell in love the first time with a man named Kent Bishop in, what was it, 1980 something, that I just felt like, no, this is it. I threw everything I'd been working for off the boat at that point, because I didn't think this was something that would ever happen for me. And then that was the beginning of the disabusing myself of so many falsehoods. And some of them, it was much later. People would hear me say something about it that was not quite correct and have to, you think that? And then put me back, because I really did grow up in a time and a space that didn't allow for me, and that made stories up about me because they didn't understand or didn't know. And
wow, that's so powerful. And especially when you think about when this was written, right? In the 1850s, the late 1850s, and Whitman feeling what you felt, probably even darker, right?
Yeah.
So the repetition of that word happy to me is so significant in this, right? As is the beginning, when the first lines, he gets news of probably what everybody would dream about, right? Like the president is saying good things about you. He's achieved some renown, but happy's there too, right? Still, it was not a happy night for me that followed. It just was not enough.
Right.
But then with the friend, right? Then, especially this page, right? And when I thought how my friend, my lover was coming, I was happy. And then, of course, that gorgeous, gorgeous last line that you read so beautifully. In the stillness, his face was inclined towards me, while the moon's clear beams shone, and his arm lay lightly over my breast. And that night I was happy. And thank you for pausing so long before that last happy, because it's such a simple word, and yet it is actually the most profound, as you're saying, the most profound of all, better than a compliment from Abraham Lincoln or anybody.
I think the thing I love about Whitman, I also love it about Dickens, about Poe, is how much they, and many writers, many contemporary writers also, how much meaning they jam into a single word. I mean, it's what is it, 5 letters, and it's so expansive. It just continues and continues. And when you think you're at the bottom of the well, it just keeps opening. It's I love that. I love that.
But I have to say, that's coming from you as the interpreter of this, and you knew how to read it, because there are people who might read this poem and not really get it because they miss the music of the emphasis on those words. You really have to think about that word happy, because Walt gives that to you in the first sentence. Something didn't make him happy. What made him happy? And he's using the pronoun he. He's not hiding here. he's really letting you know that it is a singular lover, a male lover, that is bringing that happiness. And the way you read it, Kevin, is the thing that makes that clear. So Whitman, sure, the poem itself, I love it. But what is really wonderful is to have somebody who knows it well and can bring it to an even bigger audience.
I love that about Whitman. I think of him, his love for Shakespeare comes out in the expansiveness of his writing. It really does. You see it. You see the influence, and you see how he takes it to whole new levels. And when I work on his work, and when you're talking about finding those words, it's interesting because I work on it much like I work on Shakespeare. And so when you work on a sonnet or when you work on a monologue, you're looking for a leitmotif in words, in sounds. Oh, there is one of the sounds I love in that particular piece is when he says, I heard the hissing rustle of the liquid and sands as directed to me, whispering to congratulate me, for the friend I love lay sleeping by my side. But you hear the rush of water in the S's that he brings to you. It brings it in from the window, and all of a sudden the sea is at your window. I love that. I was working with a director who shall remain nameless, so it'll become clear why. But I was on a Shakespeare piece, and they had given me everything that was in my monologue all around me. It was there. And I said to the director, I said, when we got on, I said, what is left for the audience to imagine in what I'm speaking?
Oh, you mean the actual things that you were talking about in
Everything that I was speaking about was actually there. I was like, what is left for me to, what can they possibly imagine from the words that I'm, how could they possibly find anything I'm saying interesting when they've already seen everything I'm talking about?
And you're going to get tired of gesturing towards this.
So I find I love that he gives you in the words and the lyric quality that brings the sounds and sights of what he's talking about into the actual structure of the language. I love being an interpreter, but it makes you it makes you wish so that you could lend yourself to that kind of vision on a page. I've tried many times, but I just don't think I come as close as I would feel comfortable being published, honestly.
Right. It's still, I think it's very cool to hear a performer talk about Whitman in that light. And that's something useful to a lot of us listening now who just really think about it as poetry, but that Walt somehow knows how to write this as oratory, which of course was sort of like the most popular medium of his time, right? And he wanted to be an orator and wrote about that. And he's always writing songs, Song of Myself, and so forth. So there is that feeling there, but to actually be talented enough to kind of convey that to you is super powerful. Kevin, can we dial it back? Can you tell people about how you got here? Like, we are talking a lot about Whitman, but like, how did this happen? Like, where does Kevin Jones start?
Well, I tell you, I started, I'm in Oklahoma today, and this is where I started. I never lived here in Oklahoma. My father, well, I did for 6 months, first 6 months of my life. My father, he grew up during the Depression in this area, which is very on the edge of the Dust Bowl. And my father was quite poor, and he had a journeyman's life up to the time he was about 30 something or mid 20s. And then he decided he wanted to have a career. So he did go to school. And after I had been born, he got his first job offer at 43rd in Lexington. And that is the beginning of my ruination. And
No, that's how I know you.
Exactly. So we moved to New York, and we did move around the country quite frequently, but I grew up in New Jersey. And again, I think that finding people throughout my life, the folks in New Jersey, I went to Summit Junior High School and I have to tell you, those folks are really quality teachers down there. And I kept in touch with them for many, many years after I had graduated. And in fact, my junior high school drama teacher died just a few years ago, and I had visited her quite frequently. We went to dinner many times, went to the theater many times. She saw me perform Christmas Carol, came to the show.
wow.
Just good friends, because, I mean, let's face it, she's responsible for my ruination. And 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 then I went to Florida, went to school in Florida, and met a teacher there who basically taught me to have a higher ideal about what it is that I wanted to do. And so I did kind of come along with her in an idea that there was something more to this than just the commercial aspect. I would have loved to have been more successful in the commercial aspect, and I did work in commercial and regional theater for many years and did quite well. But I really love the freedom that being an independent artist allows me, and so that's kind of where I moved into this space. And in 2010, I guess it was 2010 or 2009, somewhere in there, I was working on a 6-man Christmas Carol version for Summoners Ensemble, and we were going to build it to create a traveling production. And then life happened, and I was diagnosed with cancer, and I also, my back went out. I had a herniated disc within the same 11-month period. I've been cancer-free for over 10 years, so that's excellent.
Good news, right?
I haven't had any back problems for many, many years, so that's very good.
Okay.
But during that period of illness, I realized that life is so precious and so short. And so the 6-man version of Christmas Carol that I had been working on had a timeline that was too far out for me. And so I started thinking, what if I just did it myself? What if I did it on a carpet square? What if I did it at parties? What if I did it as a sell to this or this or this, and we would raise money to build other projects? And then through working on it, I actually fell in love with it, and the piece spoke to me in a way that it never had before. And maybe it was also because of the experience that I had, having gone through some life-threatening things.
Absolutely. I that must play a factor, right? Like just giving you another chance to really live, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there was all of that. And then on top of that, people really liked what I was doing with it. And that, in fact, my uncle, who here in Oklahoma, very gruff man, not exactly the smoothest, softest person in the world. And after I had finished doing it for my family when I was early days, just, having memorized it, just did it in front. And he came up to me afterward with tears in his eyes, which is, believe me, something I had never seen before. Tears in his eyes, and said, "Oh, Kevin, that was so good." And I said, "Oh, Chuck, I'm so touched. Thank you so much." And he said, "No, you're really not hearing me. You were wonderful, and that was amazing." And I said, "Oh, Chuck, really? I just can't thank you enough for your reaction." He said, "You've got to stop talking and listen to what I'm saying." And that was when I started thinking, oh, you know what? If my Uncle Chuck is this affected by this piece, yeah, I do have something here.
Was
And
that
so,
like your first Scrooge conversion there?
and that was my first and that was my first conversion. Yes, absolutely. Nowadays, one of my favorite things to do is I see a lot of people who are brought in against their will to see my show. Because someone likes the story and wants to bring their
funny.
Yeah. And so he comes in, usually he's very tall, usually he's about my age.
You mean he has a look and it's a
Yes.
he?
And it's usually a he, and he's usually crossed this. During the show, you see him go from here to here, and then Tiny comes in, and then you usually see him like this at some point. And then when they leave, they're unable to express their feelings about what they saw, because if they speak, they're going to cry. And so a lot of times, and I don't know if that effect of bringing them closer to themselves in a way that makes them self-reflective and want to be better, I don't know if that actually lasts longer than the night. but you know what? I'll take that.
Yeah.
Hopefully it lasts for much longer. But if it
One
only
would
lasts for
think,
the
yeah, one would
then
think that this would resonate, right? Like, because in addition to your performance, there is the actual lesson of A Christmas Carol. Like maybe they're really hearing it.
exactly. I mean, it really, I certainly, every year I hear it in a different way, in a new way, but it's always as affecting for me. And I am, you know, a lot of times in performance, I work with sense memory and things
Mm,
that people have probably heard about with Actors Workshop and Eric Morris and Uta Hagen and all of that. So I do a lot of work to develop whatever the moment is that I'm going to be in, so that when I'm there, I'm not I'm able to really be in the character and have the character's emotions and not have them be mine. And I will say that with Christmas Carol, it's I step so fully into the characters, it just happens. I don't I don't ever worry about emotional responses that need to occur during the show, because the story is just that affecting, even for the teller. And even as many times as I've told it, I'm hearing those words for the first time with that audience again that night, and it's just that affecting. And
wow.
that's what I try to do with Whitman's pieces, of course, too, is to make it so that it is the first time that I'm saying these out loud, that I'm sharing these with people, so that the effect is immediate and transformative, and reaches out to the people all around me, that they're able to feel what it is I'm feeling.
That's
So
so powerful. Yeah. To actually train yourself to recognize the uniqueness of every moment. It reminds me of, I sometimes when I'm teaching this general survey at NYU, I teach the Book of Tea, and we talk about teaism, the philosophy behind tea. And there's this saying, I'm going to get it wrong now, Ichi go Ichiya, which means one meeting, one lifetime. And basically, the premise behind the tea ceremony and everything is that every moment you should feel like that's the first time and the only time that you're going to experience that moment. So that sort of embrace of that and bringing people to that, super powerful. And I guess I have to ask you, just because all of the authors that I know that you work on are from a particular period of time, right?
yeah,
Dickens and Poe and Whitman, we're all talking about like mid 19th century Anglo-American. Is that something in you that's kind of bringing you to that moment?
I have to admit, I love 19th century literature. I really do. There's something about it, from the very flowery edge of Whitman, to the unreliable narrator of Poe, to Whitman's very cutting and descriptive way of speaking that is so full and yet so slim and
Mm.
economic. Which economic is not a word I would use for Charles Dickens. Um, but from the economy of words to no economy at all, I find that their use of language is so exciting to me. And because I suppose novels and written word was the main purveyor of ideas at that time, that it was really important that those
Mm.
words lift off the page and come into you. And it's before our culture began to allow words to wash over them.
Mm.
And I do feel like more and more, I will leave the chagrin here. Uh, more and more, I feel like we as a culture let words just wash over us.
Oh,
The
don't
volume,
be such a Scrooge, Kevin.
exactly. The volume of the television is very telling, I find.
Ah,
Um, the louder the volume, the more we're not. Are we really hearing what's being said, or are we just letting it? I can't stab me until I understand.
yeah.
Um, and I love that. I love that it massages meaning out of the words and then into me.
Mhm.
And I find it's more lasting One of the
Mm.
things that I don't know, I guess I'm sure there are many people who do this, but when I read things, if a passage is particularly affecting, it sticks in my head in such a way that I can come back to it and kind of pull it back in, and I might return to it to just learn that
Mm.
one little passage, because that is pulling me in a direction, and I like where it's taking me. So yeah, I do. I'm looking for. I've spoken to a woman that I love, an artist in Tennessee who's a storyteller, about doing something with Washington Square, which is what
Edith Wharton.
is Edith Wharton. It's what
Mm.
the movie was based on, with Olivia de Havilland. The hmm,
Oh, I wish I could help you.
yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, it's but yeah, I've asked her to. I've asked her to. Someone out there is yelling at me. Someone who knows me is watching right
I
now.
know. I hear them.
Um, but yeah, it's. I've been asking her if she might edit that down and bring us a story
Mm.
from Washington Square, because that has some real resonance in that area. Um, and then I've also talked to some other folks about coming in, and I also would like to, next year we're doing the Whitman in Love series. I'm wanting to perhaps reach out to some other artists, maybe some current poets, current queer poets, and ask them if they would like to come and take the space and make it a
Mm.
series of Whitman and other poets, or something of that nature. But yeah, I definitely all of that really is in the works, all of it.
It's so exciting because it's sort of a grassroots approach to bringing culture and meaning to people, right? It doesn't have to be a grandiose production, doesn't have to be commercial, but it has to be sensitive and really, as that performance was in the Merchant's House backyard, just really local in so many ways. So straight to the heart. I'm wondering if you can give us a little Dickens, just
Oh,
so
sure.
we can compare Charles to Walt.
Absolutely.
They're so contemporary, and yet they're so far apart.
So,
I'm actually
so,
amazed, even though I love the 19th century, and I must say I love Dickens's novels, and we lived down the street from the Dickens house when we lived in London a couple of years ago, and we were always in there doing something. They have like enactments and whatnot. But Charles Dickens, man, he was not a nice guy, kind of mean to his wife and, all those children and yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting to me that there's this, and I do see that there is, even in our modern world, this personality type that is um, very open and socially liberal with people in general, and then with the people around them specifically,
Hmm.
not as much. They get kind of deeply involved in themselves, and they're unable to see their own actions as reflected in the very work perhaps that Charles Dickens was writing. Because you could say that the very story about him and his wife and what happened with that could have been a Dickensian novel. I mean, it's really horrible what happened to
Yeah.
her, and how he abused his relationship with her after she had given him 10 children. I mean, really, really it is. But again, when I think about artists in general, I think of artists as being twin spirits in a way, a lot of
Mm.
times. And I think that as culturally, it helps me to look at them that way, because I like Picasso too, but he was really awful to women. But his work is by far some of the most amazing work I've ever seen. So I try to recontextualize his work and understand it through understanding more about what he was actually like, as opposed to just saying that he was not there, because
Right.
so obviously he was. And we could say the same thing about Whitman. Whitman made a lot of statements. We've all made statements in our lives. If you were born before 1970, I promise you've said something that
Mm.
today would resonate in a way that would not be attractive.
Mm.
we've all, and if you by extension are young today, you are saying things today that 20 years from now you will hear my voice and say, "Oh my God, I think that man had."
Right.
So
Yeah.
I just think that we need to be, I mean, forgiving to a limit. Of course, I'm not here to stand on true horrors and abominations, but at the same time, we need to be understanding of what people's personal lives are, and that they oftentimes lead their personal lives in ways that we would not lead ours, or we don't, or that we do lead ours and should not. All right, enough of all.
No, it's a huge conversation, and it's another show. And Zelia, actually, who's doing all the programming for us behind the scenes, she's writing about all this, especially Whitman and race, a fascinating topic. But I hear you on that, and I guess anyway, very interesting to channel Scrooge too. So and everybody, right? You play everybody in.
I play every character. I am everybody. I'm going to. I'll catch you up where we are in the story. Try not to have any spoilers.
Is there anyone who doesn't know Christmas Carol at this point? I'm not
sure. I'm not sure, but I always try to tell people, no, we won't tell you what happened to Tiny Tim. This is Ghost of Christmas Present, and he has just arrived, and Scrooge has consented to leave with the ghost, so that if something teaches him something, he will learn it. Actually, I could go back to that section. Let's see. Let's start here. Scrooge is just getting ready to leave. We'll just start where I had planned. How about that? Scrooge and the ghost passed on invisible, straight to Scrooge's clerks. And on the threshold of the door, the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinklings of his torch. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and make a goodly show for 6p, and laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into a saucepan of potatoes, and now two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose and known it for their own. And basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, these young Cratchits danced about the table. Oh, no. What has ever got your precious father, then? And your brother, Tiny Tim, and Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour. Here's Martha, mother. Oh, why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are. Well, never mind, so long as you are come. Sit you down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm. Oh, Lord bless ye. No, there's father coming. Hide, Martha, hide. So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob, the father, with at least 3 feet of comforter hanging down before him, and his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable. And Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch, and had his limbs supported by an iron frame. What? Where's our Martha? Not coming. Not coming. Not coming. Not coming upon Christmas Day. Martha didn't like to see them disappointed, if it were only in joke, so she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into her father's arms. Then Peter and Martha bore Tiny Tim off to the wash-house that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper. And how did little Tim behave? as good as gold and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped that people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day. Homemade lame beggars walk, and blind men see. And back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted to his stool beside the fire by his brother and sister. And to find out what happens the rest, you'll have to come see me in A Christmas Carol. You can also join us online if you want to watch our online offering. We did a film in 2020, and it is we have that up as well on our website, summonersensemble.org or merchantshouse.org. And it's $25, but it is for as many views as you'd like throughout the holiday season, and you can share it with everyone in your family for absolute free, the entire state of California. And I would love that if you shared it with them. That would be wonderful.
Well, I can't wait to see A Christmas Carol live. I think that must be spectacular. And I could feel what you were talking about with the body before, that you're just sort of bursting from this screen, this silly Zoom screen, so confining, right? But clearly it's a full body performance, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of action. It must be exhausting, Kevin.
It is. It's very tiring. I have one day a week I do 2 shows, and that is always kind of a day to steel oneself. But I will say also that as tiring as it is, that when I step in front of the audience the second time, my energy level just goes right back up to the top again. The opportunity to share this story really is truly a personal pleasure. I totally unexpected personal pleasure. And I will tell you, the horror story, or the real story of Christmas Carol for me, is that as a regional theater performer, Christmas Carol was something I did every year. And I played Fred, because I was young then. And I always had a beautiful cape and a top hat, and I looked great. And then, of course, there would be, the show would happen, and you get to December 23rd, everybody wants to go home to their own family. And so I'm backstage thinking, have we brought Tim back to life yet? Because really, and then, of course, I had this experience, and now the story is just so much more full. I do think that in some cases, the bells and whistles that people tack onto it sometimes take away from what was originally intended. Again, with Whitman too, I try to keep it pared down and simple. I don't want to add something to it that takes away something that is intrinsically there. So I do think that a lot of times with Christmas Carol, the bells and whistles tend to distract us from the story. And so a lot of people do leave my performance saying, I feel like I've never heard the story before. And that really truly is the ultimate compliment. That it was. Are
you actually using the text as, you're not taking anything out of these particular scenes that you choose?
It's his performance text. So Dickens made more money reciting his text and reading his text than he did selling his books.
Whitman did too, by the way, with Oh Captain, My Captain. So yeah.
There's such a what's a shame is that Edgar Allan Poe missed that boat with The Raven, and being able to, he did get some play out of that in New York in terms of money, but the poor man never had. To think that he's our foremost American, it's just really sad.
Yeah, don't call him the foremost American poet on this show.
That's true. Let's not do that.
but he's one of. I guess that he was such a. With between the alcoholism and sort of, the dark character, I didn't even hear of Poe acting at all. Whitman had acting aspirations, right? He was right. Out.
Whitman had acting aspirations. Dickens had acting aspirations, and actually Poe's parents were both actors.
But the adopted ones, or
no, his actual birth parents were actors.
Interesting.
But of course, he didn't have any access to necessarily. I do think, though, I think with Whitman, and this is maybe something else about 19th century, with Whitman, Dickens, and Poe, when I read their texts, there is something dramatic about all of them. there is something actorly about all of them. And the reason why I wanted to do Poe years ago was because I read Telltale Heart when I was like 13 or 14, and I said, I want to know. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to do. And I love making that, making people very nervous in the room. I tell them about the murder that I committed,
Yeah.
which I never would know that I did. But
How
I just,
gorgeous though. Yeah. What a gorgeous thing to hear too. It's enthralling.
it really is.
Yeah.
Dickens too, I had some actor bones in him, and when he chose his readings, he didn't choose his readings, based on, oh, I think this will help to sell a book, or I think this will be. No, what's the most dramatic? The section he chose from Oliver is the Nancy section, the Bill Sykes section, because that is powerful. And he wanted to show his audience what an actor he was. He didn't want them to think that he was just up there saying words. And the text, getting back to your question, the text that I use, and I do want to answer, is his performance text. And I went in that's about an hour and a half, an hour, 45 minutes. I went in and trimmed it to about, actually, my original trim was about 50 minutes. And then we went back into the novel and we included Ignorance and Want, which he did not include in his public readings because he's trying to make money, trying to keep happy. And that is not exactly the most happy section, but it does, for me, speak most vividly toward the themes. And so I wanted to include it, and my co-writer and director wanted to include it. And so we added that back in from the original text. That's the only bit. And then I changed a couple of words to make sense of what I was saying. In the very beginning, he says, my hallowed pen, or my hallowed words will not destroy it. And I say, my hallowed voice will not destroy it. So yeah, we just change a few things for sense, but every word is his. And I try to do him justice. And
I love the sensitive editing, that the book and the script, and really can get inside of it and pick and choose the things that will make it come to life. So the actual performance is about an hour or so, or
an hour, right. And it's usually an hour and 5. If I'm really milking something, I'll go to an hour and 10, but never more than an hour and 10. But there have been times where my stage manager will say, that was beautiful, and added about 5 minutes. And I'll be like, oh, sorry, I'll try to do better tomorrow. And he's like, whatever you like. He's very accommodating, my stage manager.
A gorgeous, intense experience for you and for the audience to just impersonate so many different voices in an hour, and really take the text to heart. I love that expression, to learn by heart, right? Because you really do bring it inside. And I think that exemplifies your approach to this sort of poetic 19th century reenactment / performance. Yeah. Kevin, we only have a few minutes left because we really try to keep this to an hour. So a couple of things, because I know we want to talk about ways in which the audience can reach out to you and to find out more about what you're up to, and also a few words on the Merchant's House, which we promised before.
Absolutely. First, let me just say very quickly, you can find out everything about Summoners Ensemble at summonersensemble.org. It's SUMMONERS. Ensemble.
And again, I don't think I properly introduced that, but that's the ensemble that you are part of that puts on. Yes. Did they do the Whitman too?
No, we didn't work on it directly. The same people who worked on the Whitman piece transferred over and worked for the Merchant's House, or the same people who work on Dickens' piece transferred over to work for the Merchant's House while we did. But the Whitman piece is a Merchant's House production. Summoners is secondary to that. They did do some work, but it's secondary. Summoners has done both Christmas Carol and Killing an Evening with Edgar Allan Poe. Those are 2 current pieces that we'll be offering coming up. And you can find out about those, like I said, summonersensemble.org, and I am the executive director of that company. And then also merchantshouse.org, and that's an easier URL to remember, and you can find out everything about Christmas Carol. Or when we finally do get to Edgar Allan Poe, you can find out about that there as well. And speaking of the Merchant's House, I just do want to make everybody aware that, so the Merchant's House was built in 1832. It's the only surviving home of its kind that is landmarked both inside and out. The plaster on the walls was laid in 1832.
Incredible.
The moldings that are throughout the house are some of the finest, the examples of the finest moldings of its time, not just in our country, but in the world. So we have a jewel also for those of us who are New Yorkers or who are just New Yorkers by visiting and come to see us every so often. This is this belongs to us. This is ours now. The family gave it to the city, and it is now a jewel in the city's crown. And unfortunately, the property next door has been sold to a group of developers who would like to place a 9-story hotel there. I have no problem with building and growing our city. I do have a problem when the building that you're going to building is going to possibly unmoor the foundation, which is a sandy foundation, not the kind of foundation that we would have built in the 20th or 21st century. This is a 19th century foundation. And it would unmoor the Merchant's House and tip it and cause irreparable damage that would cost millions of dollars. And the past is prologue here. We had a house next door to us on the other side that was removed, and this is what happened. The developing company has told us that they would be glad to put in some sensors that will let us know if damage begins to happen. If damage begins,
That's, oh God, insensitive.
that means that damage has occurred. So we can't, it's not good enough.
Right.
This argument with the developer, this legal battle, it is a legal battle with the developer, has been going on for 10 years, more than 10 years. My entire association with the Merchant's House, they've been dealing with this. And it's been going to the city council, who kicks it to the landmarks preservation, who kicks it back to city council, who kicks it to landmarks preservation. And each time the same directive is given, that the developers have to come to the Merchant's House to create something that is appropriate. The developers refuse.
Wow.
They are currently trying to just wait us out. The money that Merchant's House makes from this program and other programs that I produce there, and the Whitman in Love piece, instead of going for maintaining and enriching their collection, it goes toward paying for lawyers to save the house. So this is a twofold crisis. On the one hand, we have an existential crisis, and on the other hand, we have an internal crisis that we cannot maintain what has been left us. So if you'd like to find out what you can do to help us at the Merchant's House, go to merchantshouse.org. On the front page, there is a drop-down menu called Call to Arms. Go to Call to Arms, see what you can do. Of course, donations are welcome. Letter writing to the city council, to your city council person. Call your city council person and let them know that, yes, the Merchant's House is in NoHo, and I live in Harlem or the Bronx or Staten Island or Brooklyn, but this is my town. That is my house. What are you doing to protect our heritage? And that is what I would ask everybody to do, just to see what it is that you can do to support the Merchant's House as we move through. It's but as I said, the developers who have to remain nameless for legal purposes also, can you believe that? Just trying to wait us out. Just trying to wait us out. So let's show them that there's more weight in us than there is in them, and try to continue to push them to come to a reasonable solution where they could perhaps, I don't know, volunteer to shore up the foundation on that side of the house and then build whatever they darn well please.
Hear, hear. I'm totally supportive of this too, Kevin. And thank you. That is an eloquent plea. And for those of you that are out there, New Yorkers or not, as Kevin said, it's so worth a visit if you haven't been there. Absolutely gorgeous. I remember being floored by the height of the ceiling in the parlor floor, which I guess is where you perform this, right? Just So beautiful, so
Wait till
elegant.
you see it decorated for Christmas. It's just stunning.
Right.
No matter what your religious holiday brings you, it's just a gorgeous view of greenery in that room. It really is beautiful.
At the very least, go see it, right? The Merchants House Museum, and on West 3rd, is it?
It's on East 4th Street between
East 4th,
Broadway and
sorry.
Lafayette, 29
Got it
East
on the
4th
wrong
Street,
side.
Broadway and Lafayette.
Um, and absolutely go see Kevin because he is amazing. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel refreshed and rejuvenated. What a perfect thing to hear during the holidays, also at a time when there's so much unrest and just strife and horror and trauma in the world, to sort of come together for this wholehearted performance. And thank you for giving us a glimpse of that. Such a pleasure. A big thank you also to Zelia behind the zine. Zelia, do you want to come out here and just say hi? Maybe not. Yes, there she is. Yay! Zelia, by the way, everyone, is in Iceland. You may remember that Zelia is my incredible PhD student at the University of Iceland, and Iceland itself is experiencing horror and trauma. I think she could maybe use that online Christmas carol.
You
Maybe
got it.
that will be your gift, my dear, for the holidays. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. We hope to see you soon. Happy eating and feasting. And Kevin, to you too. I'll see you soon in Christmas Carol.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a great talk. Thank you
Such
so
a
much.
pleasure to talk to you. All right. Bye, everyone. See you soon.
We're done.